Hey everybody, I am back. Hopefully not just for the moment, but for longer. Rusty and I normally do take a break during the summer. Summer has been over for the most part. If we consider the September going back to school time for either us or our kids or whatever, then summer's been over for a little over a month. So I've been away almost completely. I haven't even really been watching YouTube. Really didn't do any painting over the summer. I did get a couple of games in a Warhammer Fantasy Battle, but even not a ton of gaming over the summer. Over the last month, I've started to pick it up a bit with a little bit more Warhammer Fantasy Battle gaming. And honestly, the last year, some of you may know just from watching Musty Wargamers, I got my motorcycle license, and I'd really just sort of diverted my attention. I still use the Musty Wargamers to get some inspiration and do some painting throughout the year, but I really took like a step back from the hobby for a long time. And got a couple of great trips during the summer on my bike, I guess coincidentally, as I've been picking up with gaming and the season in Canada for the bike season's been calming down, I've actually gotten really, really kind of inspired hobby-wise lately, both for gaming and painting again. I also moved, which kind of temporarily, we're doing a bit of a reno in our house, and we moved out until next spring. And so I just in the last bit, in the basement of the place that I'm at, set up a little painting area, an area with a PC where I could potentially participate, or will participate in Musty Wargamers. More on that in a moment. But what I wanted to do really is put that sort of aside. I'll talk about that stuff more. We'll probably talk about it in Musty Wargamers too, but I just wanted to show what I've been up to. I have some miniatures I'm going to show that I'm just getting close to finishing, that I was just finishing on the last Musty Wargamer show. I was painting them. That shows how I haven't, they're literally still in front of me, but I've got some solid hours since then of painting some of them, and I'll show them in a moment. But I ended up wanting for my Beastmen to add some Chaos Spawn, and as part of that is, I think I mentioned that I had, in addition to my Beastmen army, I had a small burgeoning Chaos Mortals army, or Warriors of Chaos Warriors, and that I'd purchased from someone. And then when picking these up, I ended up purchasing even more Chaos to be able to use in the future in combined armies, where they call them Hordes of Chaos, where you can use Beastmen with other things, like both demons and mortals. And so I guess the best order for me to discuss this is to show you something before I talk more about these Chaos Spawn. This is not working out well. Maybe you can see here. I have one of these old Warhammer boxes, and they're basically Chaos Warrior Regiment. To show you the back a little bit better, there are these guys here. So some people call these the Hunchback Chaos. They're like older Chaos that were kind of models that were kind of hunched a little bit. They're multi-part plastics. They're from 6th edition. And I have about 50 of them, actually. I'm not planning on painting 50 of them at this moment. And some of them I have probably like 30-something that are brand new, and then some that are already assembled and primed and partially painted that were never completed, that I'm just going to strip down in the future. But for those of you that are familiar with those, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, but I like the aesthetic, and that it's like a 6th edition aesthetic, and I like the idea of putting together some old plastics and using them for my Chaos, sort of like 6th edition Old Hammer, Middle Hammer army. But I'm not for these particular models, I'm really not that excited to paint 30 of them, or 50. And so I thought to myself, how do I go about this? And I thought, as much as I really love my normal painting that I do, for the guys back here that I'll show you, and that I've kind of my painting skills that I've kind of cultivated over a decade of kind of getting back into the hobby. I'm just not that interested in painting these guys. Like, I want them in my army, but I don't want to spend my time painting 30 of them. And so I also don't want to pay somebody else to do it either. And so I decided I'm going to try, since these are primarily armored figures, that I would try these contrast speed paints and see what they look like. Now, I haven't even assembled them yet. And I made a sizable purchase recently to get some Chaos Spawn, and these are metal models. And I thought, well, I'm just going to try them on the Chaos Spawn. Now, I wanted just sort of brightly painted kind of color schemes that just kind of look like something that came out of the warp. And this is kind of my first try. I haven't done the highlight on the big Goblin Green base yet, because I'm still keeping the base is Goblin Green, despite kind of doing a bit of a newer painting technique. And as I was putting on, I was actually really pleasantly surprised for a first time as to kind of how well they applied. Just so you guys get an understanding, I realize that you can't barely even see the white in the mouth there unless I tilt it like that. Just so you guys get an understanding, and this sort of harsh light that I have here, I mean, they do look really bright, and they are. There's a fair bit of contrast. Like, I think for someone like myself that would look at these 5 years ago before there were contrast paints, I would have thought, oh yeah, like they did a dry brush. Like, that's a dry brush job. Like, is what it looks like. And part of that is there's ridges in this model. Like, it's so the way I did a slap chop method when I did this, use these speed paints. So I'm not sure how many of you know what that is, but I'm sure that some of you do, or many of you. But it's just a method where you prime black, you do a dry brush of gray, and then a dry brush of white on the high areas. And then what that does is it just allows, when you put the thinned paint, when it covers the whites and the grays, it just leaves the color and brighter where it's white. But then where it's black and you don't get to those crevices, it's going to be black still, like really dark, if you don't use something other than black, like as your undercoat, which that's one technique. There are a lot of techniques to take this slap chop or even these speed paints and to turn them looking more like what you're used to. And this is just my first try. And the high contrast and that style of old look, like the dry brush or whatever, I actually, this took me, including the dry brushing undercoat, painting both of them and doing the dry brushing undercoat was about an hour total. Normally it's supposed to be a lot less because with smaller models, but it was just the fact that I was doing something new, they're a bit bigger. Really, this doesn't take much time at all, and that includes painting the base with regular paint. Just not dry brushing the sand yet. But in that hour, I now have these for next week to be able to play and to throw them in my army. And so, pretty good, I think. I'm not done using the slap chop technique on something. I still, for sure, with my Beastman army, where things like these guys that I'll show in a moment that are just extras of the ones that I had, I'll still be painting with my normal technique, which takes longer, for sure. And these guys, which I'm going to show in a second, all of them, these guys don't even have a highlight on them yet. And I still think they look really cool, but they don't even have a highlight yet. And they don't even have fixes yet. Like, I still have spots where paint's missing or where it bled onto something else that I have to fix. But this is like my normal painting method, and there's no replacing that, I don't think. But I have an idea for these Chaos Warriors that I don't want to paint. Because I got this heavy dry brush look with the slap chop, quite colorful, but definitely looks like that. You can even see here like the black and the yellow. Like, it looks just really like striking. Some ways kind of cool. But what I'm going to do is, when using the contrast paints, you don't have to use this slap chop to get this technique, even though there's more for me to learn with it. You can just do a zenithal highlight where your model's mostly white, or a lighter color on the top. And particularly for models that have a lot of plate, where there's less recesses. Like these ones have a lot of recesses, but if you think of like Space Marines where you have like shoulder pads that are entirely smooth, so by dry brushing, what are you doing? You're really just applying it and getting it kind of on the outside of the plate and, you know, of the shoulder pad, but it's not going into crevices unless there's like an emblem like that. By doing a zenithal highlight, it's just going to make that shoulder pad kind of bright, and then the contrast paint is going to still go into the recesses and look darker where the recesses of the shoulder pad are and the edges, and it'll look, you know, theoretically nice. I'm going to try to do that with these guys, I think, is I'm going to just do like a probably a gray, a light gray primer, and then a white kind of zenithal, and then put the contrast on. And I think they'll be brighter, they'll be a bit more uniform, a little less dry brushy look on them, because they won't technically be dry brushed. And I'm going to try that, because the applying of this, it applies really nice. Like, there were some people that were warning me about this, that I was talking about it, just like, oh, you got to know what you're doing, it's something to learn. And I always agree with that. Everything you do is something to learn. But I'll be honest with you, after having used things like Army paint, because Army Painter's washes, glazes, and then regular glazes from like GW and other things, after having done glazing already, it isn't that new, like doing this, like using this stuff. It wasn't that difficult. Now I'm going to qualify that. Some people use Citadel contrast paints, which, as from what I understand, having not used them before, they are a little different in the way they pool and can cause streaks if you let them dry. Like, you're still working on them while they've dried to a certain point, and there is some like technique things that can really make the model look bad. I used I got a set. I used some Amazon points, and I got a set of the Army Painter Speed Paint Mega Set. This happens to be much to my dissatisfaction, I purchased it without realizing that I purchased their first formula. They have two formulas. The first formula is supposed to bleed or reactivate more if you kind of paint close together and get them together kind of wet, or even if they're slightly dry, the first layer, the other one can reactivate it and cause some bleeding. Some people actually like it because you can combine your colors where they kind of form and cause like blends, you know, that some people like. They like that effect, where others that are used to more of the Citadel contrast paints like it to harden and be inert, and so you can just paint fairly quickly near it and not have it bleed. I will tell you that I really worried about this. It's one of those things when you look into it stuff and then like you kind of all of a sudden believe what everybody else says, and then like you're really worried about it. You're like, oh crap, like this is going to be a problem. I didn't have much of an issue. I'm sure I would if under certain things where I had smaller models painting closer together, and I'm sure that it is a real thing, but I had no problem. Like honestly, these worked great. I have no issues with the paints themselves. I actually, although like the different colors of the different paints do have some different properties, like as to how dark they are, how vibrant they are and stuff. Like this color is more vibrant than this one. This is meant to be more like a Nurgle, like it's called like a, I don't know, a rotting green or something like that, where this one is like plasma. It's meant to be on a plasma gun, so it really pops. But they still both look pretty bright and pretty good. I think that the way you spend time preparing the slap chop and getting your, determining how bright your color is going to be and where and how much black and dark there's going to be, or whether you would even use an undercoat that's closer to the color to create natural fades into recesses and not such striking colors like I have here, like the striking black. And those things, I think, probably, for me, have more an effect on the outcome than how I put the paint on. Hope that makes sense, because it really is all about that undercoat, I think, and preparing it in many respects, in my limited experience.